I always wake before the sun clears the pines. At 77, my body doesn't ask permission anymore, it just knows when to rise. I shuffle into the kitchen barefoot on the cold tile and reach for the kettle. The sea outside my window is still and gray, the kind of quiet that only coastal mornings understand. This house built by Elias and me 4 decades ago creaks in all the same places. I like the creaks. They remind me I'm not alone. The eggs boil just as the light begins to shift. I carry my tray to the breakfast table, 1 cup of strong tea, 1 slice of buttered toast, 1 soft-boiled egg. The view from here frames the cove perfectly, and on clear days, you can see the lobster boats start their routes. Elias used to name them all, like pets. I don't remember the names anymore, but I remember his voice saying them. I had just taken my first bite when I heard the car. I knew the engine before I saw the vehicle. My son, Soren, always drove too fast for the driveway and too slow once he stopped, as if prolonging whatever performance was coming next. Through the lace curtain, I caught sight of the SUV. Black, spotless, expensive. And beside it, a flash of beige heels. Celeste. I met them at the door with my robe still tied. "Morning," Mom Soren said, leaning in just enough to make contact with my cheek. His eyes were hidden behind sunglasses. We were in the area. At 8:30, Celeste smiled. It was the kind of smile you wear for your reflection, not for people. "We thought you might be up. We brought muffins." I stepped aside and let them in. The kitchen felt smaller with them inside it. Soren took his usual seat back, straight arms folded, like a man preparing for negotiation. Celeste placed the box of pastries on the counter with care, like they were a gift of great value. "We've been thinking," Soren said, and my stomach sank before he finished. "About your comfort. Your safety, really." "I'm safe," I said. "Safer than most." "But the stairs," Celeste chimed in. "The winter ice. Your knee." Remember, I didn't respond. We toured a place Soren continued like it was already done. Sunny Pines. It's nice. Really modern. You'd have your own apartment, full staff, activities. And a visitor's lounge, Celeste added, as if I'd be a guest in my own life. "I'm not moving," I said. I kept my voice level. "This house is mine." Soren nodded slowly like he'd expected resistance. "I understand. But it's not just about the house. It's about what's best. Long term." I looked past him out to the water. The tide was coming in. "We've spoken to a few people," Celeste said, "about the property, just in case. It's worth quite a bit now, you know." My toast had gone cold. My tea, too. But I sipped it anyway. Soren leaned in slightly, voice lowered. "Just think about it, Mom. We're trying to help." I stood and collected the dishes one at a time, steady hands masking the tremble in my chest. I have thought about it. And as they packed up their uneaten muffins and polite concern, I knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was just the opening move. Jonas arrived before lunch with a bag of groceries in one hand and a tin of black tea in the other. He never liked showing up empty-handed. After all these years, he still knocked before entering, even though he had his own key. We sat in the sunroom while the kettle warmed. I told him about the visit, Soren's fixed smile. Celeste's soft suggestions, the mention of realtors, as if my house were already on some invisible market. Jonas didn't interrupt. He listened the way he always had, with his full face, not just his ears. When I finished, he let out a slow breath and placed his cup down with care. "They're not just pressuring you," he said quietly. "They're preparing something." "I know," I said. "I just don't know what." "They want to move quickly," he continued. "That means there's urgency, maybe paperwork already in motion. If they can't convince you, they might try to override you." He didn't need to explain further. Jonas had worked for the Bureau for over 20 years. He'd seen this kind of thing before. Families declaring elders incompetent to take control of assets. I'd read about it in the paper. I never imagined I'd be one of those stories. Let them underestimate you, he said. But call me the minute anything feels wrong. 3 days later, Soren came back. He brought someone with him, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and the faint smell of hand sanitizer. He introduced himself as Dr. Ezra Lane, a specialist in geriatric wellness. The phrasing already felt staged. I just happened to be in the area, he said, easing into the living room like an old friend. Your son asked if I might check in. Nothing formal, just a conversation. I offered them tea, same as always. I didn't sit in my usual chair. I let them choose first. Dr. Lane had a notebook, but didn't open it right away. He smiled a lot, like someone hosting a game show. The questions started small. What's a typical day like for you? I answered simply. Breakfast. Walks. Reading. Calls with my grandson. How often do you forget things? He asked gently. No more than anyone, I said. Have you ever left the stove on? He pressed. I tilted my head. I live alone. If I did, I'd be gone by now. Soren chuckled too loudly, like he was nervous. Dr. Lane scribbled something down. Then came the sharper questions: current date, president's name, where I kept my medication. I answered everyone clearly, evenly, with the calm of a woman who'd been managing her life without assistance for decades. When he finally closed his notebook, Dr. Lane thanked me for the conversation. He said nothing conclusive, but I could feel it in the air. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about building a case. Soren kissed my cheek on the way out and told me not to worry. I smiled for him. The door clicked shut, and I poured myself another cup of tea. I drank it slowly, listening to the clock tick on the mantel, already certain they'd be back again. They didn't call this time. I heard the tires first, Soren's again, the slam of 2 doors, the familiar tap of Celeste's heels on the walkway. I was still in the kitchen folding dish towels when the doorbell rang. I opened it with my hands still damp. Soren walked in like it was his house. Celeste followed, carrying a sleek leather folder and a too sweet smile. Hope it's a good time, she said, already knowing it wasn't. They didn't ask to sit. They took their places on the living room sofa like it had been rehearsed. I wanted to make this easier for you, Soren began. So we've brought everything. He opened the folder and spread the contents on the coffee table, a thick set of papers with colored tabs. Some pages had letterhead. Others bore stamped signatures. All of it looked official, cold, final. Power of attorney, he said, pointing, and temporary guardianship just for safety. This one is the deed transfer, but we won't process it unless we have to. Everything's above board. I stared at the papers. Guardianship. I didn't agree to anything. You don't have to, he said, his voice firm now. Dr. Lane already signed off. He evaluated you last month, remember? That man in my living room. That was 3 days ago. Soren didn't blink. No, that was a follow-up. You never told me. I said, my voice quiet but steady. I didn't want to alarm you, he answered, as if betrayal were a form of kindness. This is just a precaution, so that if something happens, decisions can be made quickly, for your benefit. Celeste reached forward and nudged the pen closer to me. It's really just paperwork, Maribel. Nothing changes unless it has to. I picked up the pen, but didn't uncap it. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. There was a silence, tight, held before Soren spoke again. This time his tone shifted. We'll have to proceed without your cooperation, he said. We have options, but it might involve a court order and a medical facility, just until the review is done. He said it like it was routine, as if putting your mother in an institution was just another step in the process. I sat back, looking at their faces. I searched for hesitation, doubt, anything human. There was nothing left but a shared goal. My resistance had become their inconvenience. So I nodded. I signed. Each page, one after the other. My hand didn't tremble. My face didn't change. I initialed the corners, wrote my name in ink beneath the words incapable of self-management, and smiled when I handed the pen back. They thanked me. That night, after the porch light was off and the silence settled thick in the house, I called Jonas. My voice broke halfway through the sentence. "I need help," I said. "They're selling my life." Jonas didn't ask for permission. He listened, nodded once, and said, "I'll take care of it." That was all. By sunrise the next morning, he had already made 3 calls, one to a friend at the medical board, one to a woman he used to work with at the federal agency, and one to a lawyer in Portland who owed him a favor. He didn't tell me the details. He didn't need to. But I watched him move with purpose, flipping through documents with the calm of a man who hadn't forgotten how to draw a line and defend it. By lunch, he knew what I'd only suspected. Dr. Ezra Lane was already under quiet investigation. 2 complaints had been filed in the last year, both from elderly clients whose guardianship had suddenly changed hands under curious circumstances. Nothing had gone public yet, but the right nudge, Jonas said, would make everything move faster. He poured coffee into the thermos he brought and slid the papers I'd signed into a manila envelope. "You just sit tight," he said, tapping the table. "We're not going to let this stand." 2 days passed with no word from Soren, but I knew that was only temporary. People like him don't pause unless they're waiting for paperwork to clear. Sure enough, on the 3rd day, a white van pulled into the driveway around noon. Celeste stepped out first, phone in one hand, swatches of fabric in the other. Soren followed with a clipboard, walking the perimeter of the house like he was preparing it for staging. They didn't knock. They had keys now. I stayed on the porch. I didn't speak. I didn't interfere. I just sat in my chair with my tea, letting the wind lift the edge of the newspaper I wasn't reading. From where I sat, I heard their laughter. Something about the curtains, how they looked funeral home, dated. Celeste wanted a lighter palette, maybe a cool gray. Soren thought the kitchen would need a full gut job, but it would raise the listing price if they went with quartz. I heard them mention a realtor by name. I heard them say, "Flip," like it was already theirs. They never once looked at me. Inside, I knew they were measuring rooms and making mental lists. I imagined them touching the mantel Elias built with his hands. I imagined them running their fingers along the wood trim I'd polished every spring. I imagined them deciding which parts of me were salvageable and which would go, but I sat still. The longer they ignored me, the more they revealed. Every plan, every calculation spoken aloud like I was already out of the way. Jonas texted later that night. The board had opened a formal complaint. A federal inquiry had begun. A quiet sting was being arranged. The timing was tight, but the law, Jonas said, was still on our side. And by Saturday, I knew exactly who would be at my door. They arrived just after 8. I heard the SUV door slam, followed by Celeste's voice light, distracted already mid-sentence about backsplash colors. They didn't expect anything different. Soren had texted me the night before. "We'll stop by in the morning, just taking some measurements." He didn't ask if I'd be home. He didn't care. I stood in the hallway as they opened the door with the key they hadn't earned. But today, they weren't the first ones in the house. Agent Renee Palmer was already in the living room dressed in plain clothes, but with a badge clipped to her belt. 2 investigators from the medical board waited near the dining room table, along with a representative from the state's Elder Protection Agency. The tension in the room was quiet, but unmistakable, like a house holding its breath. Soren stepped inside. First eyebrows raised at the unfamiliar faces. "Can I help you?" he asked. Tone brisk, already annoyed. Agent Palmer turned. "Soren Callow." "Yes, I'm Agent Palmer. I'm with the Federal Elder Fraud Task Force. We're conducting an investigation regarding Dr. Ezra Lane and your recent filings regarding your mother's capacity and estate." Celeste came in behind him, still holding her tote bag full of fabric samples. She froze mid-step. Soren glanced at me, standing by the stairs. "What is this?" I didn't respond. Agent Palmer held up a folder. "Dr. Lane has signed a full statement. He's confessed to falsifying medical records in exchange for financial compensation. We have documentation of a wire transfer from your account to his for $5,000. He also indicated this wasn't the first time you reached out." Soren's mouth opened, then shut again. He looked toward Celeste, but she'd already backed toward the doorway, color draining from her face. "Sarah," he said, voice sharp. She shook her head slowly. "You said it was legal. You said it was just paperwork." The medical board representative spoke next. "You filed guardianship with forged medical evidence, Mr. Callow. That constitutes fraud and perjury. Any transactions made under that guardianship are now under review." "Wait," Soren said, voice rising. "You don't understand, she's not well. She forgets things, she's been unstable." Agent Palmer turned toward me. "Mrs. Callow, may I ask you a few questions?" I stepped forward. "Of course." She asked me the date, the president's name, my address, and what I had for breakfast. I answered all of them calmly, clearly, while Soren stood fuming behind her. Then she asked how I'd come to sign the guardianship papers. I told them, word for word. No embellishments, no anger, just the truth. Celeste sat down suddenly, her bag falling to the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. Soren stepped forward. "You're just trying to make me look bad." "No," I said, holding his gaze. "You did that yourself." I walked past him, past the agents, and stood in the center of the room. This is still my home. The meeting took place 3 days later in a small conference room at the county office. Jonas sat beside me, calm and composed, while the assistant district attorney reviewed the file. She was polite, precise, and entirely unsentimental as she listed the charges: fraud, forgery, elder abuse. If pursued to the full extent, Soren could face up to 10 years. Celeste had already agreed to cooperate. She'd offered a full statement within 24 hours of the sting. According to the ADA, she'd broken down the moment they showed her Dr. Lane's confession. She didn't deny what she knew, but insisted she hadn't realized how far Soren had gone. They asked if I wanted to move forward with prosecution. Jonas didn't speak for me. He just placed a hand near mine on the table and waited. I thought about the porch, the curtains, the cold pen in my hand when I signed the papers. I thought about my son lying to my face, then asking for forgiveness before the truth had even finished landing. "I won't press charges," I said. "But I have conditions." They looked up. 1. The house is mine. Any claim Soren filed is withdrawn. 2. He enters therapy. Not once. Ongoing. He finds out why he did this. The ADA nodded. Writing. 3. Celeste works. I don't care where. But she contributes. If she stays with him, she doesn't get to stand behind him anymore. And 4, the ADA asked. They both cooperate. Fully. With investigators, with the board, with anyone who asks. No half-truths. No walking it back. Jonas leaned back slightly. He didn't need to say it. I saw the quiet approval in his eyes. The ADA tapped her pen. "Those are reasonable. If Mr. Callow agrees, we'll draft the terms." "He'll agree," I said. "He wants a future." That night I received a text from Soren. No apology. Just one word. Agreed. I deleted it without replying and returned to the living room where Jonas was waiting with 2 mugs of tea and a folder from the lawyer handling the reversal filings. I sat beside him, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt like it belonged to me again. We sat at the table like we used to. Quiet plates, polite forks. Celeste had brought a salad. Soren brought a bottle of wine, though he barely touched it. It was the first time we'd all been in the same room since the investigation ended. The air still held remnants of something unspoken shame, maybe, or uncertainty. But at least it wasn't war. Jonas sat beside me. He hadn't said much during dinner, just offered to carve the chicken past the salt when asked. Soren kept glancing at him, his expression unreadable, like he was still trying to place him in a story he hadn't been told. When the plates were cleared and the coffee poured, I took a breath. "I want to tell you something," I said, gently setting my cup down. Setting my cup. "Jonas is going to be living here." Celeste blinked. Soren froze mid-reach, then slowly lowered his spoon. "I thought he was just visiting," Soren said, carefully. "He's been visiting for over 20 years, I said. "He was more than a friend, even when your father was still alive." Soren didn't speak. His face didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. "I never told you, because you never asked," I added. "You never wanted to know much about my life, only what you needed from it." The silence sat longer than I expected. Then finally, Soren looked at Jonas and gave a small nod. It wasn't approval. It wasn't rejection either. Just something between recognition and resignation. "I'll try," he said. "I guess I have a lot to get used to." "You're not the only one," I said quietly. Celeste reached across the table and rested her hand on his. It surprised me how steady she looked. After they left, Jonas and I stood on the porch. The breeze off the water had shifted slightly, bringing the scent of pine and salt. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't have to. We stood in silence, the kind that comes only when the worst has passed and the healing has begun. The roses went in first. New soil, new roots. I planted them along the fence line where the old ones had withered years ago, right under the kitchen window. I'd meant to replace them for ages, but life had a way of delaying things. This time, I didn't wait. The court order arrived, folded inside a plain white envelope. Just a few sentences reversing what should never have been allowed. Guardianship terminated, medical findings nullified. The title deed had never officially changed hands. The ink they tried to bind me with was never valid. Celeste sent a message later that afternoon. She'd started work at a local insurance office, entry-level, but steady. "It's humbling," she wrote, "but I needed it." I believed her. Soren texted too, once a week now. Updates from therapy. Short, awkward sentences that didn't try to make up for what happened, but at least acknowledged it. It was something. Small growth takes time. Jonas brought out the porch chairs just before sunset. We sat in the quiet, watching the sky slip into indigo. The house was still. Not empty. Not waiting. Just settled. No one was coming to take anything anymore. No voices telling me where I belonged or who I should become. I didn't need saving. I never did. I just needed space to breathe and someone who saw me without trying to manage me. Jonas reached for my hand, and I let him take it. The porch light clicked on, and neither of us moved to turn it off.